one of my teachers once said that love is a bullet with your name on it. So whenever I'm working on a story, in my mind, I think, oh, the character's been shot. So in the case of Witness, certainly Ford has been shot in a different way. John Brooke falls in love with Kelly McGillis, Rachel, and has to contend with those feelings for her. So Act 2, Part 2 can really only be gotten to when you've designed Act 2, Part 1, and that's one of the frustrating things. People think that a movie goes, that the story goes from beginning to end, but in fact, it really doesn't. So if we go to our book, and it's Chapter 5, which begins on page 32 of the ebook. The action that I'm going to read to you from the book is from Witness, and again, if you go to the breakdown in the beginning of our book, which I will hold up, which is on page 1, for those of you who have the book and can see what. Let me see, I'm still getting the hang of this. There we go. Alrighty, that's not too good. Let's see. Alright, no, better. There. Okay, we're looking at the yellow place here. We're looking at sequences 7, 8, and 9. Anyway, the basic action is that he fixes his car, and they have their dance, and it's the dance, as I am so fond of saying, that really lets you know if there's something going on there. And then Uncle Eli comes in and reprimands them, of course clarifying the issue. And meanwhile, Captain Schaefer back in Philadelphia questions John Brooke's partner about what's going on, and we fear that Carter will come to no happy end. And then in the next sequence, there's that famous barn raising scene where John Brooke is working alongside of Alexander Goodenough, playing Daniel, the contender for Rachel's hand. And I don't know about you, it's like John Brooke, Alexander Goodenough. It's like a no-brainer. It's so obvious that Alexander Goodenough is going to win out because he's this gorgeous blonde hunk, and Harrison Ford is a sort of wizened police captain. But anyway, the movie, a lot of girls wouldn't agree with me, but it's just very cute to see these incredibly handsome men lifting a barn, and then Rachel comes and she brings John Brooke lemonade, and we know that he's fallen in love. Then that evening he sees her washing in that famous scene, and does not approach her, because if he does, that's his life as he knows is over. And later he tells her that one of them would have to completely change their lives, and he decides not to come to her side, much to her disappointment. And then what happens next is that he learns out that his partner has been killed, and he knows that he's responsible. So he calls his boss, Chief Schaefer, and confronts him. And then he's so full of his old anger that when he goes to town with the Amish, instead of being able to maintain a Amish-like demeanor, he picks a fight with an Amish baiter, and that makes it easy for Captain Schaefer to find him, which sets off the climax at the farm, which ensues. Now, how can we, sort of break this down and understand it? Well, we can understand this. The question that is asked in Act 2, Part 2 is, who or what would the main character die for? And this can be literal, obviously, when you're working in a comedy or something like this, but in this case, it's pretty darn literal. And Harrison Ford has to really make a decision about whether or not he's going to let his need to kill the bad guys, to do his duty, quote-unquote die or change, in order to be with Rachel, and he decides not to. So this is a movie with the old-fashioned ending where he experiences the completion of his dream. What dies is the potential for true love with Rachel, which is very tragic. I use die when I speak about screenwriting because I think that what we humans fear the most is change, and that we perceive change as these little deaths. And by using the word die and getting you to understand that giving up love and deciding not to go with one person or another is a change on the scale of death, is part of what I want screenwriters to understand, because otherwise we tend to make this part of the movie way too soft. And so here he has to choose between letting his duty, quote-unquote, die or change, or letting his love for Rachel be forfeit, and he does that. And I'm always very sad. I mean, I'm a girl, and I find that sad. But what's implied in the ending of that movie is that even though he realizes his dream in a new way, and that he will be humanized, and hopefully in his future life realize the value of finding love. Now, in The Godfather, we have a different situation where, again, there's a tornado that blows Michael to the middle of the movie, but then there's another tornado, which is the equivalent in The Wizard of Oz of when Dorothy goes to see the wizard, and the wizard says, no, I can't send you home until you go and you get me the witch's broom. It's a new adventure. She has to do more. She can't just go home. And what happens in The Godfather is that Michael shoots the drug dealer and the cop, but he can't go home. He has to go to Sicily and wait out the battle that will ensue as a result of this assassination. So even though he has killed, he's been in the army, so he could say that he's killed, this is a war, he's killed to save his father. And he is still somewhat idealistic and is not ready to take over the family, which, as we know, is what happens in the third act, and he forfeit his dream. So there must be a series of events that grow him and expand his personality so that we can have the third act that we intend. And this is a big, important notion that, we talk about what's the character's dream in Act 1. Well, we also talk about the character's inner conflict and why, or what is inside them that is preventing them from already having what they seek. And so the idea is that if they were so together in Act 1, there would be no movie. So Act 2, Part 2 also serves an important function because it helps us create a whole piece of character development, and also allows us to tell sort of a story within a story that allows us to really have a third act. And in the case of Godfather, Michael goes to Sicily, and what happens? Well, he falls in love. And the use of a subplot to create this new adventure in Act 2, Part 2 is very important. Sometimes, as in Witness, the character is already in the movie. We meet Kelly McGillis in Act 1. Sometimes the character is a new character, as it is in The Godfather, where when he gets to Sicily, he meets Apollonia and falls in love with her. And what happens in The Godfather is that he falls in love with Apollonia, he marries her, and then his father's enemies try to kill him, and she dies as a result. This is the event that makes it possible for Michael to become the new Godfather, by hardening him and kind of breaking his soul. Without this event, I think that it's a very good chance that he would have gone back to New York and simply resumed his life. Of course, we also have the added part where Sonny is killed, and that acts as a further catalyst. But mainly, it has to do with Michael changing. Now, in terms of Witness, it's a more subtle change, because up until Act 2, Part 2, Harrison Ford, or the John Book character, is completely unaware that he has any choices. He is simply out to get the bad guys, and he is on this straight course, and that's all he's got, and that's all that's going to happen. What happens in Act 2, Part 2, is that he becomes humanized, he begins to care about other people, he develops a relationship with Samuel, he sees that he could live another sort of life. And so instead of his decision to be a good cop being an automatic choice that he's never thought about, this part of the movie, Act 2, Part 2, helps him have another experience, seasons him, gives him a new adventure, so that when he makes the choice, which is to go back and get the bad guys, though they in fact come to him, the choice is made with a higher level of consciousness.